What if Antarctica was once home to the first civilization? Imagine, if you will, a land of ice and silence, endless and white, stretching farther than the eye can wander, a realm where time itself seems to slow, where the wind carries whispers older than memory, and the snow reflects not just light, but echoes of lives long past. In the stillness of that frozen continent, where the sun barely kisses the horizon and shadows stretch like quiet rivers, there lies a question that refuses to settle. Could it be that beneath these layers of ice, beneath the crushing weight of centuries, there was a world, vibrant and alive, teeming with minds, hearts, and the quiet hum of civilization? Close your eyes, and let the thought unfold. The ice is not simply a barrier. It is a keeper of stories, a guardian of secrets too ancient for the sun to recall. Each crystal, each frozen ridge, holds the memory of days when the land was not white with frost but alive with motion. Imagine towers of stone rising above valleys, their surfaces etched with symbols whose meanings have been swallowed by time. Streets, lined with structures of unknown design, wind like veins through a city that no modern map can chart. The air, even now, seems to vibrate faintly with the echoes of footsteps, the muted chatter of voices long silenced, the laughter of children who ran through gardens now buried beneath ice a mile deep. And yet, this is not a story of ghosts or of mere fancy. No, the land itself suggests its own truth. Antarctica is a continent older than memory, older than most mountains, older than the continents we call home. In its frozen silence lies the sediment of ages, the fingerprints of climates that have risen and fallen like the breaths of a sleeping giant. Imagine the oceans higher and warmer, the forests spreading across lands that now lie under kilometers of ice, and the sky softer, painted with colors that no longer visit this far south. In that vanished world, the first stirrings of human thought, of ingenuity, of community may have taken root. Perhaps these early architects shaped stone and wood, crafted tools and art, and wondered at the stars in ways that mirror our own curiosity today. As your mind drifts, consider how fragile memory can be. Snow accumulates in layers, each season a thin veil over what came before. The ice presses down, a slow, patient archivist, preserving, compressing, hiding. Perhaps beneath the glaciers lie temples that once reached for the heavens, libraries filled with knowledge carved in stone, even simple dwellings where the warmth of fire once drew families close. Could the winds that sweep across the plateau carry faint remnants of song, a melody formed by voices that knew the rhythm of creation itself? We may never hear it, and yet if we listen with imagination rather than ears, the notes rise, fragile but persistent, from beneath the frozen crust. Time here does not behave as it does elsewhere. Imagine yourself standing on the edge of a crevasse, looking down into a darkness that seems to pulse with memory. Below, the ice has preserved not only water but history itself, a history of growth, of civilization, of wonder and quiet triumphs. Each layer is a page, each crystal a letter, each current of frozen air a sentence whispered across millennia. And so we wander in thought, tracing the shapes of a world that has vanished, and yet, in its vanishing, left traces as indelible as the stars that wheel above the icy night. Perhaps the first astronomers looked at those same skies, though continents have shifted and oceans changed, though the ice now hides the land where their hands shaped the beginnings of society. The imagination is our lantern here. Let it light the paths that no foot now treads. Picture streets illuminated by the flicker of torches, the distant glint of polished stone, the scent of earth and water mingling where rivers ran free. Imagine a council gathering in a hall whose roof has long since collapsed beneath snow, where decisions were made, songs sung, and life measured not in hours or days but in cycles of sun and moon, of planting and harvest, of tides and winds. The architecture, if it existed, would have been adapted to a world now unimaginable, not for survival against snow, which came later, but for balance with a climate that nurtured its creators. It was a harmony between beings and their environment, a rhythm that modern civilization often forgets but which the ice remembers with infinite patience. And yet, even as we conjure these visions, the mind senses something more. There is a quiet intelligence embedded in the ice, a memory that does not speak in words but in shapes, in the shifting of glaciers, in the silent collapse of mountains into themselves, in the slow carving of valleys and channels over thousands of years. It is as though the earth itself is attempting to recount the story, to remind us that we are part of a continuum, that civilization did not begin in isolation, that human thought arose as a response to the same patterns that govern ice, wind, and ocean. Perhaps those first people, whose names are lost, looked at the horizon and saw possibilities that we can only dream of, their hearts beating in cadence with the frozen land, their minds aware of the vastness that stretched endlessly around them. Consider the idea of discovery in such a place. To step upon Antarctica now is to walk in silence, a place so removed from human habitation that the mind struggles to accept its reality. And yet, beneath the surface, where satellites cannot see and drills cannot yet reach, lies a potential narrative older than recorded history, a chronicle of beginnings that challenges every assumption about where humanity first drew breath. Perhaps beneath the ice there is evidence of agriculture, of rituals, of artistry, of lives rich and full, of questions asked beneath stars that shone brighter in the clear, unpolluted skies. The thought is dizzying, unsettling yet soothing, the first civilization, hidden not because it was lost, but because time demanded its preservation in layers of frost, awaiting minds willing to imagine its presence. Now, drift further into this meditation. The wind across the plateau hums a melody that seems to come from the past, and as you listen, you may begin to feel the pulse of a world frozen yet alive, silent yet speaking. It whispers of ingenuity, of human longing, of civilizations that rise and fall, leaving traces in stone, in memory, in the shape of the land itself. And though we may never excavate temples or streets, the mind's eye can traverse them freely. We can imagine a central square where traders met, a market alive with movement and sound, a fountain or well at its heart reflecting the sky. Every imagined detail, every layer of this vision, is a thread connecting us to a time that may have been, a time that the ice remembers in ways we are only beginning to perceive. The enormity of Antarctica, its isolation, its purity, makes it a mirror for thought. Here, the mind can wander freely, untethered by modern noise, by the weight of expectation, by the constant ticking of clocks. The ice demands patience, contemplation, and a surrender to scale, and in this surrender, the story of a hidden civilization grows not from facts alone but from the resonance of possibility. What structures might have survived the slow creep of glaciers? What knowledge encoded in stone or metal could lie beneath, waiting for thaw, for discovery, for imagination to bridge the gap between what was and what is now? We will never know fully, yet the pondering itself becomes a meditation, a gentle rhythm of thought that eases the mind into reflection. And as night deepens over the frozen continent, the auroras shimmer above like spectral witnesses to history. Light dances across ice cliffs and snowfields, painting the world in colors that defy description. Perhaps those first inhabitants watched similar skies, feeling the same awe, the same quiet understanding that they were part of a universe vast and eternal. Their lives, their creations, their questions and fears, echo faintly across the ages, and in imagining them, we participate in their story, bridging time with the simple act of thought. In this contemplation, Antarctica is not merely ice and rock, but a canvas, a memory, a vessel carrying the first whispers of human civilization, waiting for us to hear, to feel, to dream. The glaciers shift imperceptibly, carving new forms even as they preserve old ones. Beneath the surface, frozen rivers may still trace paths that once carried people and goods, connecting settlements we cannot yet name. The mountains loom like sentinels, guarding secrets of architecture, artistry, and ritual. And the air itself seems charged with expectation, with a latent energy that hints at what might have been, if only the world had allowed the eyes to reveal it fully. It is a quiet power, subtle and persistent, a reminder that history is not always linear, and that civilizations may rise, fall, and be hidden not by failure, but by the patience of nature herself. And so, as you lie back and imagine this frozen world, let the mind drift between layers of ice and time. Feel the weight of centuries pressing gently, like the embrace of a slumbering giant. Hear the echoes of a civilization that might have existed, see the shapes of buildings, hear the rustle of activity beneath snow and frost. Let the boundaries between past and present dissolve, and in that dissolving, find a gentle rhythm, a quiet cadence, a lullaby sung not by human voices, but by the memory of the land itself, timeless, enduring, and waiting to be remembered. And yet, even as the imagination paints these visions, there is a hum of caution, a reminder that the ice is patient and indifferent, holding its secrets in silence. Beneath the frozen surface, layers upon layers of history compress slowly, invisibly, inexorably. It is a history written not in books or scrolls, but in crystal lattices, in trapped air, in the subtle bends of rock and sediment pressed beneath the weight of glaciers. Perhaps some of the earliest tools of humankind lie frozen, remnants of hands that shaped them with care, that marveled at the world around them. And in imagining those hands, you can almost feel their warmth, almost hear their and yet the land itself was not entirely conquered. The first people of Antarctica, if such they were, would have known the rhythm of the continent, would have felt the breath of glaciers and the whisper of winds as companions rather than foes. Perhaps they built observatories to study the stars, to track the movements of planets and ice alike, to learn from the heavens what could not be gleaned from earth alone. Perhaps they measured time not by clocks but by shadows, by the flow of rivers that ran free before ice claimed them, by the migrations of animals, by the patterns of storms that crossed the vast plains. Their understanding may have been profound, rooted in careful observation, in patience, in a reverence for the fragile balance of existence. And so we drift further, between present and past, between snow and memory. The mind's eye begins to see traces of ritual, perhaps a ceremonial circle of stones, a place where communities gathered to honor the turning of the seasons, to mark births and deaths, to offer gratitude to forces unseen. Perhaps in these ceremonies songs were sung, melodies that carried meaning far beyond the notes themselves, encoding stories, lessons, and connections to the land. Even now, the wind may carry faint remnants of these sounds, distorted and softened by ice and time, yet persistent, like the memory of a dream you can almost remember upon waking. The glaciers above, immense and slow-moving, are themselves storytellers. Watch them with the mind, tracing their silent journeys across valleys and plains. Each crevasse is a line of verse, each fracture a stanza, each rhythm of movement a heartbeat of history. And if we are quiet enough, we might hear not only the ice, but the echo of human presence beneath it, the clatter of daily life, the careful tending of tools, the measured steps of those who walked deliberately, consciously, aware that they were part of a continuum far larger than themselves. Civilization, in this sense, was not just what they built, but how they perceived, how they connected with each other in the world, and how that connection, subtle and powerful, continues to ripple even now, through imagination, through story, through the patient remembering of ice. And the night above Antarctica is no less a witness. Stars will endlessly across the sky, mirrored in the frozen landscape below, creating a dialogue between heaven and earth that may have guided the first minds, that may have inspired awe, reverence, curiosity, and the very beginnings of inquiry. Imagine someone from that time, looking upward, counting, questioning, noticing patterns, dreaming not just of survival but of understanding, of meaning. In such small, quiet acts of observation, the foundation of civilization is laid: awareness, curiosity, the will to shape, to create, to leave traces that endure. Now let us consider the passage of seasons, of centuries. Snow accumulates slowly, pressing down, transforming landscapes, covering cities in silence. Rivers freeze, winds scour valleys, and the world changes imperceptibly yet relentlessly. What was once a garden may now be a plateau of ice. What was once a market square may be a hollow beneath glaciers. And yet, this transformation is not lost but preservation. The first civilization is not destroyed but archived, catalogued by time and ice, awaiting minds willing to imagine, willing to trace the contours of a world both gone and still present in spirit. In this, there is a serenity, a meditation. That which seems lost may in fact be preserved, waiting for perception rather than excavation. Consider, too, the subtle interplay of life and death, of creation and decay. Beneath the ice, fossils may mingle with artifacts, the remains of creatures large and small, the silent witnesses to a world in balance, to ecosystems both delicate and resilient. And in this mingling, a profound story emerges. That civilization did not exist in isolation, that those first people, if they indeed walked these lands, were part of a vast tapestry of life, connected to all that surrounded them, attuned to rhythms that modern life has largely forgotten. The mind can wander here, imagining how they moved, hunted, gathered, observed, celebrated, mourned, how the pulse of life was as much a part of their civilization as stone and timber, as much as the wind and the stars themselves. And so the imagination flows, unbroken, between frozen present and imagined past. Mountains loom like ancient sentinels, glaciers stretch across valleys, and the mind traces shapes beneath the surface. Homes, streets, temples, libraries, places of wonder and thought. Perhaps they left messages, not in writing, but in alignment of stones, in arrangement of spaces, in subtle markings that echo principles of geometry, astronomy, and art. Perhaps those principles still persist, encoded in the very shapes and flows of the land, waiting for us to perceive them, to feel them, to awaken recognition that what we see is not mere ice, but the record of thought and labor, of imagination and community. And as we continue, imagine the people themselves. They are not caricatures of myth, nor mere silhouettes. They are beings of curiosity and tenderness, intellect and intuition. They laugh, they argue, they teach, they learn. They look outward to horizons that modern eyes cannot see, and inward to questions of purpose and connection. Perhaps they sought immortality not in conquest, but in understanding, in the relationships they forged with each other and with the world. And in the stillness of Antarctica, those intentions, those acts, are preserved, compressed into ice and memory, waiting for the mind to reach across time and awaken them once more in thought and dream. The auroras, dancing above, reflect a light that is both ethereal and eternal, shimmering across the frozen expanse like echoes of insight. They remind us that observation and wonder are as much a part of civilization as architecture, art, or tool-making. Perhaps the first astronomers or philosophers of this hidden land stood beneath these lights, contemplating the vastness of existence, the intricacy of the world around them, and recording, in subtle ways, their understanding for generations yet unborn. And though the ice may have claimed their writings, their structures, their immediate presence, the essence of their contemplation persists, encoded not in ink but in patterns, in echoes, in the very form of the land itself. Now, as we allow the mind to drift further, let us imagine journeys between these layers of time. The present, stark and silent, gives way to a memory of lush valleys, of open waters, of skies more vivid than we can perceive today. The past, rich with human endeavor, folds gently into the present, suggesting that even beneath the seeming emptiness of ice, life once thrived, thought once stirred, and civilizations, in ways we cannot fully recover, once existed. It is a meditation on continuity, on the persistence of thought and creativity across millennia, a lullaby of history sung not in words, but in vision, in imagination, in the quiet recognition that time is both expansive and intimate, both external and internal. And as the mind lingers on this thought, imagine the rhythm of daily life, a cadence woven into the fabric of the continent itself. Morning light would have filtered through the spaces between structures, soft and golden, catching on surfaces that reflected care and intention. People moved with purpose and grace, aware of each other, attuned to the land, listening to the subtle sounds of wind over ice, the distant roar of rivers not yet claimed by glaciers, the flutter of birds whose migrations had once reached this far south. Their movements were deliberate, measured by instinct, by the cycles of sun and season, by a quiet understanding that life is as much about harmony as survival. In this imagined world, artistry would have flourished. Stones carved not only for function but for beauty, walls adorned with patterns that told stories, that encoded knowledge of stars, of seasons, of life itself. Music might have drifted through the air, soft notes shaped by hands that knew both the power of sound and the need for subtlety. Imagine instruments crafted from bone, wood, and early metals, each tone resonating not just in the space it occupied but in the minds of those who listened, forming a shared consciousness that strengthened community and connected individual awareness to collective memory. The very act of creating, whether song, tool, or structure, would have been a meditation, a reflection of awareness, a dialogue with the universe. And yet, beneath this delicate flourish, there was also work. Life required attention, planning, understanding. Water, food, and warmth demanded solutions, innovation, adaptation. Imagine workshops where early inventors shaped materials with skill and patience, crafting objects that balanced practicality with elegance. In their hands, tools became extensions of thought, vessels for curiosity, instruments through which humanity began to understand and influence its environment. The process was not hurried but attentive, a rhythm in harmony with the slow pulse of the land, the measured pace of glaciers, the silent movement of time itself. The seasons themselves were teachers. Winter arrived not as an enemy but as a guide, shaping behaviors, instilling discipline, urging introspection. Snow covered the world in white, a canvas for reflection, for contemplation, for planning. Spring brought thaw and possibility, rivers swollen with meltwater, plants returning to life, the first stirrings of growth. Summer offered abundance, a time of gathering, of community, of learning. And autumn, with its fading light and cooler winds, invited remembrance, reflection, and the careful preservation of knowledge for the months when survival would require foresight and patience. Each cycle of season was a meditation in itself, a lesson encoded into daily life, into the very structures of civilization. Now imagine ceremonies that mark these transitions. Gatherings beneath the open sky, where song, dance, and ritual intertwine to honor the passage of time, to celebrate existence, to offer gratitude. Perhaps firelight flickered across faces and symbols, casting long shadows that merged past and present, human and natural, imagination and memory. In these moments, the first civilization, hidden beneath ice now, was at its most alive, its most aware, its most human. The act of coming together, of witnessing, of participating, was as essential to survival as food or shelter, because it forged connections, created continuity, and preserved knowledge not in records alone but in lived experience. And then, as centuries passed, as the ice began its slow advance, the visible traces of this world disappeared, yet their essence was preserved. Streets vanished beneath kilometers of frozen water. Houses became buried chambers of memory, temples turned to cold stone blanketed by frost. But the patterns remained, subtle, encoded in the shapes of valleys, in the flow of ancient rivers now locked in ice, in the alignment of mountains and plains. To the patient observer, to the mind willing to drift between layers of time, these traces are perceptible, faint but undeniable. Antarctica, though silent, speaks through them, a record not easily read, but present, insistent, eternal. Let your thoughts now wander to the people themselves, to their relationships, their thoughts, their curiosities. They would have questioned the stars, the winds, the animals, the seasons, the nature of existence itself. They would have laughed and cried, loved and mourned, as we do now. In this reflection, time dissolves. The present merges with the past. The ice that conceals becomes the medium through which imagination resurrects what was. And as you imagine them, you feel a connection, subtle yet profound, a recognition that civilization is not simply the structures or objects left behind, but the consciousness, the awareness, the questioning that animates life. Consider the role of knowledge, of teaching, of observation. Perhaps there were schools, informal or formal, where elders shared wisdom with youth, where stories carried practical guidance as well as moral reflection. Perhaps they observed the heavens with instruments or intuition, noting cycles, predicting patterns, learning to read the language of stars, clouds, wind, and water. Each observation, each lesson, each story was a thread, weaving the fabric of society, strengthening bonds, ensuring continuity. And though the records themselves may be gone, the principles, the ingenuity, the curiosity remain, encoded in the ice, in the land, waiting for imagination to awaken them. And as you drift further into this meditation, Picture the first explorers, the first travelers within this hidden continent. They moved with care, mapping, observing, connecting one settlement to another. Paths worn into the earth, now invisible beneath snow and ice, carried footsteps, knowledge, and stories. Perhaps they encountered creatures now extinct, adapted to a world long transformed. Perhaps they marveled at phenomena we cannot easily imagine, the quiet shifting of glaciers, the transient bloom of plants adapted to cold, the subtle light that refracted off ice like living gems. In their awareness of the extraordinary, civilization deepened, intertwined with observation, reflection, and the cultivation of insight. And now, in the stillness of your mind, let us consider the intangible, the emotions, the dreams, the aspirations of these first people. Perhaps they asked questions that echo through time. What is our place in the world? How do we connect with each other, with nature, with the heavens? Perhaps they felt wonder at patterns too subtle to be noticed, empathy for creatures too small to be recorded, reverence for forces that shaped life without care for individuals. In contemplating these possibilities, the mind itself participates in the civilization, drawing life and wisdom from imagination, breathing vitality into what lies beneath ice and memory. The auroras above continue their quiet dance, casting ethereal light that seems to pulse in rhythm with thought. Beneath, the glaciers shift imperceptibly, shaping valleys, hiding rivers, cradling cities in frozen embrace. And in this interplay of light and ice, presence and memory, the story persists. It is not a tale that demands proof, nor a fact that can be verified. It is a meditation, an invitation, a lullaby sung across time. The first civilization may have existed, may have thrived, may have been lost, yet in imagination, in reflection, in quiet thought it endures. Each mental image, each soft word, each breath taken while contemplating these visions becomes a connection, a bridge, a recognition of the endurance of human curiosity, creativity, and spirit. And as the mind lingers in this suspended time, let us wander deeper into the spaces between ice and memory. Picture a hidden courtyard, once vibrant with life, now silent beneath layers of snow. Imagine children running along paths that no longer exist, their laughter mingling with the whisper of wind, a sound carried not by air but by imagination itself. Each step leaves no trace in the present, yet echoes persist in the mind, reverberating through the silent halls of memory preserved in frozen stone. In this way, the civilization beneath Antarctica is not simply a relic of the past. It is a living meditation, alive in thought, in contemplation, in the quiet act of imagining. Consider the art that might have adorned their dwellings. Perhaps walls were painted with pigments drawn from minerals, telling stories of the sky, of the seas, of the creatures that roamed alongside them. Perhaps carvings captured constellations, mapping the heavens in ways lost to time, encoding knowledge in beauty, in pattern, in rhythm. And in each mark, each brushstroke, each subtle curve, there was intention, awareness, a consciousness striving to connect with the world, to understand it, and to leave a whisper of presence that would endure, if not in stone, then in imagination. As you contemplate these spaces, notice the harmony, the rhythm, the deliberate care with which life was arranged, as though the first civilization knew that existence itself is art. And yet, existence was tempered by necessity. Survival required observation, reflection, adaptation. They would have studied the patterns of ice and snow, the migration of animals, the subtle shifts in climate, learning not to dominate, but to move in tandem with the land. Perhaps they engineered shelters to withstand the advancing cold, created tools to hunt or gather, cultivated plants in sheltered spaces, harnessed fire not only for warmth but for transformation, for creation. Each act was infused with thoughtfulness, each effort a meditation on resilience, each achievement a bridge between human ingenuity and the vastness of nature. Now drift further into the intangible, the rhythms of community, the pulse of connection. Imagine gatherings in the evening, families huddled together, sharing stories, songs, knowledge. Perhaps elders spoke of ancestors, of the cycles of ice and sun, of the mysteries observed in stars and seas. In these exchanges, society was woven, thread by thread, song by song, story by story. Connection was not merely social, it was spiritual, intellectual, a recognition that each individual was part of a continuum, and that knowledge, care, and wonder were gifts to be nurtured, shared, and preserved. And beneath the ice, hidden from sight, perhaps there were places of contemplation, sanctuaries where individuals pondered the mysteries of existence. Perhaps one could walk into a chamber, carved with care, where light filtered through openings in crystal or ice, casting patterns that shifted with the sun and moon. Here, perhaps, they recorded observations, meditated on cycles, composed music that imitated the wind and waves, pondered mathematics in the arrangement of stones, or simply watched the subtle play of shadows and light, finding in that quiet the essence of understanding. Even now, in imagination, these sanctuaries endure, waiting for minds to reach across time and awaken their presence. The glaciers above move silently, inexorably, shaping the surface of the continent, preserving what is beneath, erasing what is fleeting. Each crevice and ridge becomes a page, each frozen river a chapter, each subtle shift in ice a punctuation mark. And as we follow this rhythm, the mind begins to perceive the faint echoes of ritual and observation, of daily life intertwined with the cycles of the natural world. The first civilization, if it existed, did not live in isolation. It lived in dialogue with earth, ice, wind, and sky, weaving understanding, beauty, and survival into a tapestry that the modern eye can scarcely imagine, yet that the mind, patient and open, can reconstruct with gentle attention. Imagine now the exploration of this land. Perhaps travelers moved cautiously across plateaus and valleys, guided by stars, by landmarks, by an intimate awareness of topography and weather. Paths would have been etched into the terrain, invisible now beneath snow and ice, yet their memory persists in the mind's eye. Perhaps settlements were connected by waterways or overland trails, by knowledge shared across generations. And in the act of moving, observing, recording, these people shaped not only the physical landscape but the intellectual one, laying the foundations of awareness, of curiosity, of understanding that would ripple across time, even if hidden beneath kilometers of ice. And as night deepens, the auroras shimmer with subtle light, as if reflecting the pulse of thought beneath the surface. Imagine looking at them and feeling a resonance, an echo of the minds that once contemplated the heavens, that charted the stars, that asked questions without expecting immediate answers. Their curiosity, their patience, their reverence for the vastness of existence, persists not in ruins alone but in the sense of wonder that we can still access through meditation, imagination, and reflection. In this sense, the first civilization is not lost. It is alive in thought, alive in the act of contemplation, alive in the quiet recognition that human awareness, like ice, preserves what endures. And so, as you rest in this meditation, drift between layers of time. Feel the presence of those who came before, whose hands shaped tools, whose voices once sang, whose minds traced the heavens and the cycles of earth. Let the ice enfold you, patient and eternal, carrying the memory of what was, what could have been, and what persists in the quiet corners of imagination. Each breath, each thought, each moment of attention is a connection, a bridge across time, a recognition that civilization, in its essence, is not only built but felt, remembered, imagined. And now, as your mind lingers in the quiet of this frozen world, take a gentle breath and feel the layers of time beneath you. The first civilization, imagined and felt, rests here, preserved not only in ice but in consciousness, in the act of remembering, in the soft hum of thought. Yet the story does not end here. Beyond the ice, beyond the stillness, the continent whispers more, tales of transformation, of change, of epochs that unfolded while the glaciers crept, shaping mountains, carving valleys, and hiding what once was from all but imagination. Let your awareness drift forward, to times when the world shifted and climates changed, when the ice advanced and retreated, when seas rose and fell, reshaping continents and coastlines. Imagine the subtle persistence of life, the quiet endurance of knowledge, the resilience of human curiosity carried in whispers, songs, patterns, and the artifacts of thought. Even as snow blankets the earth, even as glaciers grind slowly over stone, the traces of life remain, awaiting discovery in imagination, in contemplation, in the patient unraveling of memory. And as we prepare to journey further, let your mind hold both presence and possibility. The ice beneath your feet, the stars above your head, the echo of footsteps from millennia past, and the anticipation of what lies yet to be revealed. For Antarctica is not merely a frozen land, it is a keeper of time, a reservoir of civilization, a silent storyteller whose chapters unfold in subtle shifts of perception. The next chapter waits, poised between past and present, inviting us to explore deeper, to listen more closely, to imagine with greater patience and care. Breathe in the stillness, let the memory of the first civilization settle softly, and allow your thoughts to drift toward the hidden stories yet untold. There are rivers that once flowed, mountains that once bore cities, skies that once reflected the ambitions of human hands, and spaces where ingenuity, curiosity, and wonder first awakened. As you drift, let the ice itself become a guide, a quiet companion leading you through layers of time, toward revelations both ancient and eternal, toward the next chapter in this meditation on history, imagination, and the hidden roots of civilization beneath the Antarctic sky. As we move beyond the quiet memory of the first traces, imagine a land beneath the ice where civilization endured in ways unseen, where ingenuity and understanding intertwined with the rhythms of nature. The glaciers above are not barriers but keepers, pressing slowly upon the earth, preserving the intricate tapestry of human thought and endeavor that once flourished. Here, in hidden chambers of stone and ice, the echoes of life continue to vibrate, subtle yet persistent, like a heartbeat beneath centuries of silence. Consider the architecture that might have existed. It was not built for grandeur alone, nor for fleeting display. It was crafted with an awareness of forces greater than any one person or generation, the pressure of ice, the shifting of the land, the cycles of the sun and moon. Stone walls were aligned with celestial markers, towers built to withstand storms and long winters, and dwellings arranged to optimize warmth, light, and harmony with the surrounding landscape. Each structure was a meditation in itself, a balance between utility and reverence, between survival and artistry, between mind and environment. Imagine walking through a courtyard where each step echoes centuries of careful thought, where the placement of a stone or a beam carries meaning beyond its immediate function. And in these spaces, life thrived quietly. Imagine workshops where early engineers shaped tools from stone, wood, and metal, observing the world with patience and ingenuity. Perhaps they constructed mechanisms to move water, to store food, to measure time, inventions born not from urgency alone but from a deep awareness of patterns and cycles. Each creation was a dialogue with the world, a subtle negotiation with the forces of nature, and a reflection of the human desire to understand and shape existence. In these acts, civilization was not only physical but intellectual, a lattice of thought, observation, and careful adaptation, preserved beneath the weight of ice. Now drift further into the realm of cultural practice. Consider rituals, ceremonies, and gatherings that bound community and memory together. Perhaps there were spaces designed for meditation, reflection, or instruction, where elders taught younger generations not merely skills, but ways of perceiving the world. Music may have resonated softly through chambers, a rhythm echoing the cadence of the wind and water outside, connecting those within to the natural cycles that govern survival and prosperity. Songs, stories, and dances were both celebration and instruction, a means to encode knowledge into memory, into body, into heart. And though the snow now covers these spaces, the essence of these practices lingers, accessible through imagination, contemplation, and gentle meditation. The environment itself shaped awareness. Winds sweeping across plateaus carried subtle lessons. The slow creep of glaciers reminded of patience and endurance, and the changing light of day and season marked rhythms of reflection and action. Perhaps maps were etched in stone, rivers measured for flow, the positions of mountains and stars recorded for guidance. The first scientists, if we may call them so, observed not to dominate, but to understand, to participate in a dialogue with a world vast and intricate. And in this interaction, knowledge became living, dynamic, and enduring, encoded in structures, tools, and shared memory, preserved for ages in the patient embrace of ice. Imagine, too, the simple, daily acts of existence, the preparation of food, the tending of fires, the crafting of clothing, the careful maintenance of homes and instruments. Each task, performed with care, was a meditation, a reflection of awareness, a subtle engagement with cycles of life and survival. Perhaps communities organized work according to patterns of stars and seasons, balancing labor with reflection, action with observation. Every gesture carried intention, every habit encoded experience, every moment of attention reinforced a continuity that transcended generations. And then, consider the hidden knowledge encoded in art and symbol. Walls and objects may have been inscribed with patterns representing cycles of weather, constellations, and spiritual concepts. Perhaps these symbols communicated lessons across generations, carrying wisdom too complex to speak aloud, accessible only to those trained in observation and interpretation. Each line, curve, and shape was a record of thought, a meditation on the relationship between mind, society, and nature. Even now, beneath the ice, their echoes persist in form, pattern, and resonance, awaiting the patient mind to perceive them. Now, let us wander into imagination's deeper chambers. Picture hidden libraries, carefully constructed to resist decay, filled with records of observation, reflection, and invention. Scrolls, carvings, or objects encoded with mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and art may lie preserved in frozen silence. Each preserved insight was not merely practical, but reflective, a meditation on the nature of existence and the role of humans within it. The builders and keepers of such knowledge were aware that civilization endures not only through survival, but through attention, care, and the careful transmission of understanding across generations. And yet, life was not static. Climate shifted, glaciers advanced and retreated, rivers changed course, winds altered their paths, and yet the people adapted, observed, and responded. The ice itself became both companion and teacher, a force to study, respect, and incorporate into daily life. Perhaps they developed methods to track its movement, predict its behavior, and harness its resources. Perhaps architecture evolved to anticipate its slow pressure, and communities organized to maximize safety, warmth, and cohesion. In every adaptation, we see reflection, awareness, and the resilience that defines humanity's earliest experiments in civilization. And as your mind drifts over the frozen expanse, imagine the subtle rhythms of thought and ritual that guided this hidden civilization. Life was both observation and meditation, each moment a careful reflection on patterns of nature and existence. Perhaps there were spaces devoted to philosophical contemplation, chambers where thinkers studied the stars, recorded cycles of ice and water, and pondered the very essence of time itself. Here, understanding was not hurried, knowledge was not forced, and questions were treasured as deeply as answers. The ice above pressed slowly, patiently, as if to remind them that thought itself can endure, and that true insight requires the measured passage of moments. Music, too, was a language of subtlety. Imagine instruments shaped from bone, wood, and early metals, each tone carefully harmonized with natural resonance. Songs may have carried encoded memory, the migration of animals, the pattern of seasons, the stories of generations. Voices could rise softly in harmonies that echoed against stone walls, blending with the whispers of wind and the soft drip of melting ice in hidden chambers. Through such harmonies, lessons were preserved, connections strengthened, and the mind attuned to rhythms far greater than itself, to the pulse of the world around them. Consider the spiritual dimension of this hidden culture. Perhaps they perceived the world not as a collection of isolated events, but as an interconnected web, where every stone, river, wind, and star held significance. Rituals may have aligned with celestial events, acknowledging cycles of the heavens and their reflection on the earth. They may have celebrated both life and death, observing the transformations of nature as mirrors of their own existence. In these practices, awareness became sacred, attention became devotion, and the act of living was inseparable from understanding. And though these ceremonies are now hidden beneath ice, the essence persists, a quiet echo that can still be sensed through reflection and imagination. And then, the technologies of this civilization, subtle and intelligent, harmonized with nature rather than opposing it. Perhaps water was channeled through ingenious systems, carefully measured to nurture both people and plants. Structures may have been designed to maintain warmth, maximize light, and resist the slow pressure of glaciers, reflecting knowledge of materials, geometry, and environmental forces. Tools were extensions of thought, shaped to perform with efficiency, yet crafted with care and artistry. The very act of creation, from stone carving to fire tending, was a meditation, an engagement with both the visible and unseen forces that shaped life in Antarctica. now drift to the schools of thought, the quiet teaching spaces. Perhaps elders guided young ones in observation, measurement, and reflection, teaching not only practical skills but ways of perceiving the world, of connecting action with consequence, of understanding cycles both terrestrial and celestial. The passing of knowledge was deliberate, careful, nurturing. Stories encoded ethics, mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and artistry in ways that required attention, patience, and imagination. And through this careful transmission, the civilization endured, not always in buildings or tools, but in the patterns of mind and practice that, though buried, remain accessible to the imagination. The ice itself was teacher and companion. Glaciers shifting imperceptibly reminded them of patience and endurance. Snowstorms taught caution and adaptation. Winds carried both sound and silence, subtle signals for navigation, observation, and reflection. Seasons marked time, each bringing challenges and lessons, the harshness of winter, the promise of thaw, the abundance of summer, the reflection of autumn. Each element became a mentor, shaping thought, guiding creativity, reinforcing understanding. Civilization was not simply survival. It was alignment, observation, reflection, and the harmonious integration of life with forces greater than any individual. And in the quiet hours of contemplation, beneath auroras and starlight, they may have written, carved, or constructed symbolic representations of knowledge, maps of stars, diagrams of water flows, records of cycles, encoded lessons of both practical and philosophical nature. Each artifact was more than mere function. It was thought made tangible, reflection made visible. Even now, buried beneath ice and sediment, these echoes endure in form, waiting for imagination to awaken them, for attention to perceive the persistent presence of awareness across millennia. As your mind wanders, imagine also the networks of trade, communication, and collaboration that may have existed. Paths across frozen plains, waterways once navigable, or hidden corridors of mountains and valleys may have linked communities. Knowledge flowed alongside goods, techniques for cultivation, methods for tool-making, artistic expressions, and philosophical insights. Civilization was not a solitary act but a collective endeavor, a subtle choreography of thought, movement, and intention, preserved now in silence, in pattern, in imagination, awaiting recognition. And so the meditation continues. Imagine the people themselves, the curiosity in their eyes, the care in their hands, the rhythm in their speech. Perhaps they wondered as we do, observed as we do, dreamed as we do. And now, even though glaciers press down and centuries have passed, their questions, their insights, their quiet efforts at understanding, persist. They form a bridge across time, a continuity of human consciousness, reminding us that civilization is not merely a series of artifacts, but a living engagement with the world, a meditation that endures in thought, reflection, and imagination. And now, let us drift further into the quiet depths of imagination, where the hidden civilization of Antarctica reveals its subtler, more mystical dimensions. Imagine a people attuned to the whisper of glaciers, the faint pulse of wind over ice, the shimmer of auroras above their heads. These natural phenomena were not merely background. They were teachers, companions, guides. Perhaps rituals were crafted to honor these forces, to align human life with the rhythms of the frozen continent, to perceive messages in the subtle creaks of ice, in the slow advance of snow, in the shifting patterns of light and shadow. Awareness itself became sacred, a form of meditation, a bridge between human consciousness and the vastness that surrounded it. Consider the ceremonial spaces that may have existed. Perhaps stone circles, carefully aligned with celestial events, marked the solstices and equinoxes, encoding astronomical knowledge and reflecting a profound understanding of time and motion. The walls of hidden chambers might have been adorned with symbolic carvings, geometric patterns, and subtle inscriptions, each a key to observing and comprehending the cycles of the natural world. And in these spaces, individuals gathered not merely to witness, but to participate, to attune themselves to larger rhythms, to harmonize thought, intention, and action with forces far beyond the human scale. Music and sound played a subtle, yet essential, role. Imagine soft tones echoing through ice-carved corridors, instruments designed to resonate with natural frequencies, harmonizing with the sound of wind, shifting glaciers, and distant water. Perhaps specific sequences were used for meditation, for instruction, for storytelling, and for marking sacred moments in time. Each note was not mere entertainment, but a conduit of knowledge, a way to transmit understanding, emotion, and cultural memory in ways that words alone could not capture. Music, in this sense, became both a language and a form of perception, an integral part of the civilization's spiritual and intellectual life. And then there was the art of observation itself, a practice refined over generations. Individuals may have recorded the movement of celestial bodies, the behavior of animals, the slow transformations of ice and snow, not just for survival, but to perceive the hidden order in the world. Perhaps patterns in the snow revealed information about distant weather, subtle changes in animal behavior informed migration and hunting, and reflections of the aurora inspired understanding of cycles both terrestrial and celestial. Knowledge was lived, embodied, and transmitted, preserved in action as much as an artifact, encoded in subtle, almost invisible ways that required patience and mindfulness to perceive. Let us also imagine the spiritual dimension, a quiet reverence for life, for transformation, for the impermanence that governed all things. Perhaps rites of passage were conducted beneath shifting auroras, in the hush of snowfall, in the presence of glaciers whose slow, inexorable movements reminded them of the eternal flow of time. Births, deaths, the turning of seasons, all were observed, honored, and integrated into an awareness that life and land, human and nature, past and present, are intertwined. Even as ice consumed cities and rivers, these teachings endured, carried forward in ritual, meditation, and shared memory, imperceptible to those who do not attune to them, yet persistent nonetheless. And what of their technologies, intertwined with this mystical awareness? Perhaps tools and structures were designed to honor natural law as much as human need. Ice channels for water, storage systems insulated by frozen soil, shelters oriented for light, warmth, and harmony with prevailing winds. Mechanisms may have existed to track celestial cycles, to measure time and distance, to preserve seeds and food, all crafted with care and intentionality. Every creation was a reflection, a dialogue, a meditation, an acknowledgement that human ingenuity must coexist with the enduring, patient forces of the world. The landscape itself became an archive, a repository of knowledge encoded in forms both subtle and enduring. Valleys, ridges, and hidden caverns may have been shaped to convey meaning, to guide movement, to preserve sacred spaces. Paths once traveled were now buried under snow and ice, yet the memory of alignment, of proportion, of purpose, endures in the imagination, as if the land itself remembers the intentions that molded it. Civilization here was not merely what was built or created, it was the conscious attunement to existence, the reflection, the care, the perception that transformed ordinary life into enduring practice. And in this meditative awareness, the people themselves existed fully. They observed, they reflected, they celebrated, they mourned. Their curiosity, their reverence, their careful attention to the world formed the very foundation of culture, art, and knowledge. Even as the glaciers advanced, even as centuries passed, the essence of their awareness persisted, encoded in rhythm, pattern, memory, and imagination. It is in this subtle, persistent presence that the hidden civilization continues to exist, a whisper beneath ice, a meditation across time, a quiet bridge between what was and what can be remembered. Finally, as your mind rests in this quiet vision, feel the rhythm of continuity. The ice above, patient and enduring, preserves both absence and presence. The auroras shimmer as if reflecting insight, wisdom, and the pulse of thought that once animated these hidden communities. And though human eyes may never see the full extent of what existed, imagination, meditation, and reflection allow us to perceive it, to inhabit it, to walk softly alongside it. The second chapter, rich with culture, knowledge, and mystical attunement, is complete, and yet it leaves us poised to wander further, to explore the next mysteries hidden beneath time, ice, and memory. And now, as the echoes of hidden ceremonies, music, and thoughtful observation settle softly in your mind, let us drift toward the next horizon. The first civilization beneath Antarctica, alive in imagination and preserved in ice, has revealed its rhythms, its practices, its harmony with nature, and yet the story does not end here. Beyond these chambers of thought and ritual, beyond the careful alignment of stone and the soft resonance of music, the land itself whispers of change, of forces both inevitable and transformative, of mysteries yet to be uncovered. Let your awareness float forward, to epochs when climates shifted, when glaciers advanced and retreated with patient inevitability, when oceans rose and fell, reshaping coasts, plains, and hidden valleys. Imagine the subtle endurance of human ingenuity, the persistence of observation, the quiet resilience of communities attuned to cycles beyond immediate comprehension. Even as structures were buried, and pathways vanished beneath the weight of ice, the essence of thought, of awareness, of civilization endured, encoded not in stone alone but in rhythm, pattern, and memory. And now, as we prepare to explore this next chapter, feel the gentle tension between loss and preservation, absence and presence. The ice above may conceal, but it also protects, archives, and teaches. Beneath the frozen expanse lie stories of adaptation, of survival, of wisdom passed across generations, waiting to be sensed, imagined, and remembered. The next chapter will lead us into the hidden responses of civilization to change, into mysteries of technology, culture, and knowledge lost and preserved, into whispers of human thought that survive in pattern, rhythm, and silence. Breathe deeply and let this continuity settle. The auroras above shimmer like insights yet to be grasped, the glaciers beneath shift imperceptibly, holding secrets that invite patience, attention, and imagination. The journey is not only through space, but through time, through consciousness itself. The third chapter awaits, poised between the known and the hidden, between preservation and transformation, ready to guide us deeper into the mysteries of Antarctica and the civilizations it may have sheltered. And now, As your mind lingers on the patient layers of ice, imagine epochs unfolding, centuries and millennia passing like gentle breaths of the earth. The hidden civilization beneath Antarctica, once vibrant with thought, ritual, and observation, begins to feel the subtle pressures of change. Glaciers advance slowly but inexorably, reshaping valleys, redirecting rivers, erasing paths, and burying cities beneath their crystalline weight. The first people, attuned to the rhythms of the land, sense these shifts, understanding that survival is no longer merely a matter of skill or invention, but of adaptation, patience, and wisdom. Consider the subtle ways life might have changed. Shelters are reinforced, pathways altered, methods of storing food and water refined. Knowledge is passed with increasing care, encoded in patterns, rituals, and practices that can endure the shifting climate. Each decision is deliberate, each movement thoughtful, for the forces of nature are vast and unyielding. And yet, in this adaptation, there is beauty, an awareness that the survival of civilization is intertwined with observation, reflection, and respect for the forces that shape existence. And then, imagine the cultural responses to these transformations. Ceremonies evolve, songs change their cadence to mirror the movement of glaciers and the rhythm of storms. Art adapts, depicting landscapes transformed by ice, animals that now traverse altered paths, and skies that shift with the patterns of light and weather. Philosophy deepens, reflecting on impermanence, resilience, and the nature of change. The people themselves become both observers and participants in a larger story, understanding that their role is to harmonize with forces greater than themselves while preserving the knowledge that makes them human. Technology, too, responds to climate. Ingenious methods of insulation, water storage, and energy capture are developed. Tools and devices become more precise, attuned to the rhythms of nature rather than imposed upon it. Perhaps early instruments were used to predict ice shifts or seasonal changes, to measure the subtle flow of rivers beneath snow and ice. Each innovation is a meditation, a reflection of intelligence intertwined with observation and patience, a dialogue with the world that surrounds them. In this, civilization persists not merely by survival, but by understanding, by harmonizing action with perception. Yet, as centuries pass, the changes accelerate. Glaciers consume entire valleys, rivers vanish beneath frozen sheets, and what was once open and navigable becomes a labyrinth of ice and snow. People move, adapt, and sometimes perish, leaving behind traces that are subtle, almost invisible. The civilization endures not in buildings alone, but in memory, in patterns of thought, in ritual, in music, in the quiet transmission of knowledge that does not rely on sight alone but on perception, reflection, and shared understanding. The very act of living becomes a meditation on continuity, resilience, and the intricate balance between human endeavor and natural forces. And now, imagine the mysteries that emerge from this quiet endurance. Hidden chambers beneath ice, once centers of learning, meditation, and observation, are preserved by cold, their contents intact yet silent. Perhaps they contain maps of stars and rivers, tools that reflect ingenuity and adaptation, records of thought encoded in symbolic carvings or objects. Each artifact is a whisper from the past, waiting for attention, imagination, and contemplation to awaken its meaning. Even as physical structures are buried, the civilization's essence persists, accessible to those who can attune to its subtle rhythms, its echoes preserved in the very fabric of the frozen land. And so, As the mind drifts over these silent landscapes, consider the philosophical implications. Civilizations rise, adapt, endure, and sometimes vanish from immediate perception, yet their impact persists in consciousness, imagination, and the patterns they leave behind. Ice does not destroy memory. It preserves it, challenging observers to perceive beyond the surface, to imagine, to meditate, to reconstruct from what is visible and invisible alike. The story of Antarctica's first civilization is not merely one of survival, but of awareness, adaptation, and the persistence of thought across time and space. Finally, as you rest in this reflection, let the rhythms of ice, wind, and aurora guide your imagination. Sense the pulse of hidden cities, the careful observation of generations, the subtle harmony between life and environment, and the wisdom encoded in every act of survival, creation, and contemplation. The third chapter unfolds slowly, like the movement of glaciers themselves, revealing not destruction alone, but the enduring beauty of awareness, the persistence of culture, and the quiet meditation that allows civilization to exist even beneath ice and time. And now, as your mind drifts across frozen landscapes, imagine the hidden technologies that once pulsed quietly beneath the ice. Perhaps they were subtle, elegant systems designed to harmonize with the land rather than dominate it. Water channels carved with precision, insulated stores preserving food and seed, shelters oriented for optimal warmth, light, and wind protection, each innovation a reflection of careful observation and meditative attention. Tools, instruments, and devices were not merely functional. They were extensions of thought, manifestations of intelligence attuned to cycles of ice, wind, sun, and celestial patterns. In the hands of those who created them, technology became a form of contemplation, a dialogue with the natural world, a way to align human life with forces greater than themselves. Imagine further the preservation of knowledge. Perhaps symbolic carvings, subtle diagrams, and encoded artifacts held insights into astronomy, hydrology, and philosophy. Each pattern, each carefully measured mark, carried information intended to endure, to be perceived and interpreted across generations. Knowledge was not stored solely for immediate use, but as meditation, as a reflection of awareness, as an offering to the future. And as glaciers slowly advanced, these records were both threatened and preserved, their meaning waiting for patience, imagination, and deep observation to awaken them. Consider, too, the possible reasons for the civilization's disappearance from visible history. Perhaps sudden climate shifts altered the landscape beyond recognition, rivers vanished, ice advanced, and familiar valleys disappeared. Perhaps resources once abundant became scarce, forcing communities to adapt, migrate, or perish. Disease, environmental instability, or subtle failures in technology could have compounded the challenge, testing the limits of resilience. Yet even as physical structures fell silent, the essence of thought, observation, and cultural practice persisted, encoded in ritual, art, music, and memory, waiting beneath ice for imagination to perceive its traces. Now, envision the spiritual and philosophical response to such transformations. Perhaps the people turned their attention inward, observing impermanence in all forms, attuning to cycles of life and decay, reflecting on the fleeting yet enduring nature of existence. Ceremonies may have marked these shifts, blending observation with reverence, practice with meditation. Music, song, and story could encode both knowledge and solace, guiding hearts and minds through periods of uncertainty. The civilization's awareness did not vanish with structures. It evolved, condensed into subtle patterns, rhythms, and symbols, awaiting recognition by minds capable of perceiving beyond the surface. And now, as your mind drifts over the vast frozen expanse one final time, let us linger on the quiet resonance of a civilization that once breathed beneath Antarctica. Its cities, tools, rituals, and knowledge have long been hidden beneath layers of ice, yet they endure, not in grandeur or fame, but in the subtle imprint of awareness, reflection, and harmony with the world. Each act of observation, each careful creation, each quiet meditation upon nature has left traces that survive in imagination, in thought, in the patient recognition of continuity across time. The glaciers, relentless and patient, both erased and preserved. Rivers vanished beneath frozen sheets, valleys became hidden chambers of silence, and yet the essence of human curiosity, ingenuity, and reverence for existence persisted. Civilization, in this sense, is not measured by structures alone, but by the patterns it leaves in thought, by the attentiveness it cultivates, and by the quiet bridges it forms between mind, environment, and time. Beneath layers of ice, the pulse of observation, music, ritual, and knowledge continues, subtle and eternal. And so, imagine walking across these hidden landscapes, feeling the presence of those who came before. Their awareness is not lost. It whispers through wind, ice, and aurora. It resonates in the patterns of thought, in the cadence of song, in the alignment of structures, and in the silent rhythm of life attuned to the environment. Theirs was a civilization of patience, contemplation, and harmony, a civilization that understood the impermanence of form but the endurance of awareness. And though centuries have passed, imagination allows us to perceive, meditate, and connect with it still. Consider, too, the lessons carried in this frozen story. The balance between human action and natural forces, the beauty of observation and care, the subtle endurance of culture even when the visible markers vanish. The first civilization beneath Antarctica teaches that survival is intertwined with reflection, that knowledge is preserved in thought as much as in artifact, and that harmony with existence itself is perhaps the deepest wisdom of all. Even in disappearance, there is presence. Even in silence, there is song. Even beneath ice, life endures in consciousness and memory. And now, as the mind settles, drift gently towards stillness. Let the auroras above shimmer softly as if carrying the pulse of insight. Let the glaciers below feel like quiet guardians, holding secrets and whispers across millennia. Breathe in the presence of the hidden civilization, and let it dissolve gently into the awareness of now, a meditation on continuity, resilience, and wonder. Time, ice, and thought converge, revealing a truth both subtle and enduring, that civilization, in its essence, is not lost, so long as consciousness can perceive, imagine, and reflect. Finally, as your awareness rests, feel the quiet harmony of the story's conclusion. The frozen land, the hidden knowledge, the subtle technologies, the music, the rituals, and the meditative presence of human endeavor, all converge into a single, soft resonance. The first civilization beneath Antarctica is not gone. It lives in rhythm, in pattern, in thought, and in imagination. And as you drift into quiet, perhaps into sleep, carry with you the gentle pulse of awareness that bridges past, present, and the mysteries of time itself. Here, in the hush of ice and contemplation, the story rests, complete, serene, and eternal.